Coming up, we've got Game 2 from Chernev's classic text, Logical Chess, Move by Move. This is a game collection aimed at the beginner to intermediate level player, designed really to help reinforce chess fundamentals. And in this video, I'm going to be taking you through the game, what you can learn from it, and how you can apply it to your own play. My name's Nathan Rose. I'm the author of Chess Opening Names, and I'm also an enthusiastic adult improver. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. I do all kinds of content on chess, so by subscribing, you won't miss out on any of the great videos that I've got coming up. We're taking the side of black here, and it begins according to good solid opening fundamentals, both sides fighting for the center, developing their pieces sensibly, and then bringing their bishops out too, preparing for rapid castling. This opening, by the way, is known as the gioco piano, which in Italian means quiet game. It didn't stay quiet for too long, as a bit of a spoiler. But both sides are getting their pieces out, and now white is preparing the move d4. If white can play d4, then white will gain great control over the center. If you can achieve this ideal center with two pawns on e4 and d4, that's a good thing from white's point of view. So c3 is preparing that so that if d4 is played and black captures, then white will be able to capture back with a pawn. Understanding this, black moves the bishop back to b6. The reason is that black is trying to avoid the situation where white's able to play d4 with an attack on the bishop and the pawn at the same time. So with bishop to b6, when d4 comes, as it did in the game, black can ignore this and instead develop again with queen to e7. So the queen defends the e5 pawn, so now if there was to be a capture, d takes e5, you've got an extra defender on that pawn. And now white does something very smart. Castling actually defends against the pawn on e4 indirectly. Let's see what I mean. So one move that was possible before white had castled, let's say that if white had done something very slow and very bad, then the threat would have been to capture here and then to capture on e4. The queen had some pressure on the e-file, okay? But by castling, if black tried to do the same thing of capturing here and then capturing on e4, the way that it's indirectly defended is white would have to follow up here, winning the queen due to this skewer. So castling is a very good move. I mean, it gets the king out of danger, number one, but it also indirectly defends the pawn on e4 as a very nice second effect. So black just continues developing. And now this is the move which the author is quite critical of. As it turns out, this is not so bad for white. You can see the engine evaluation on the side here. It's still favorable for white. White's still got their natural advantage that white gets by moving first. But there are some downsides to this move. Black's bishop on b6 now has a better diagonal than it did a move ago, right? This pawn was blocking that diagonal, and by advancing it, the bishop is suddenly more powerful. White has also limited the scope of their own light squared bishop. This pawn on d5 now blocks white's light squared bishop from having the same influence over this diagonal. So those are the downsides for white, pushing this pawn ahead. But white also gains something from this pawn advance. Well, it hits the knight, so the knight now has to choose a different square. It was quite good on c6, but by advancing it to d5, it now has to move somewhere else. So where does it move to? Well, it shouldn't move to a5. That would actually be a losing blunder. It looks okay because you're attacking this bishop, but the thing is this bishop can actually move out of the way, and now this knight is short of squares. Even with black to move, black can't create a square for this knight to go to. So black can play anything here. Let's just say that black castles, and the problem is that black can now find the knight trapped after white plays b4. So that attacks the knight doesn't have a square, and the knight is lost. And it's for this reason after d5, the knight goes back to b8. So I would say that here white has lost something from playing d5. What white lost we just talked about. This bishop now has more limited scope and black's bishop has greater scope. But white's also gained something. It's gained space and it's also forced the knight back to a passive square. Okay. So white now plays bishop to d3, which I think is wrong on principle. When you're playing the opening, it's important not to move the same piece twice if you can help it. The author mentions this in the book as well. There was a problem here. You had to do something about this pawn on e4, which was threatened with capture. But a much better way to defend that pawn from being captured would be to develop a new piece off its starting square. Look at white's queenside. This bishop, knight and rook all need to get into the game. The light squared bishop is already playing, so why not defend the pawn in a better way by playing knight to d2? That's one key inaccuracy that white played, moving the same piece twice in the opening. You don't want to do that in general. So bishop to d3, and now black is preparing to develop the light squared bishop. And now this is the move which the author is again quite critical of, h3. It's quite understandable why such a move is played, because the move bishop to g4 is quite annoying, pinning the knight. And I think many players at, let's say, the below 1000 level, even the below 1500 level, just like to prevent such annoying moves. And what the author's really trying to get across is that a move like this, although it prevents one problem, that of bishop to g4, it creates new problems. And we're going to see how that transpires as the game goes on. Again, I think white should have just developed their pieces. Knight to d2, again, is just a very good move. You're getting the knight off its starting square. So h3, it prevents that bishop to g4 pin. But now black goes for quite an interesting plan. Plays h6, and you might be asking yourself, well, why is h3 such a bad move? And then why is h6 such a good move? Well, it's because white has put their king into the kingside castled position, whereas black hasn't. Okay, so now we're going to see black attempt to open up the kingside for white by playing the plan g5 and g4. The move h6 prepares g5. You couldn't have played g5 straight away because white could just take it. So h6 has got the idea of playing g5 next. And the other thing here is that black doesn't need to be in any rush to castle. Actually, black is quite safe with their king on e8. And the reason for that is because the center is closed. I think this is another key lesson from this game, is to always ask, where is your king safest? If the e-file was open, like let's say that this pawn on e5 and e4 were gone or traded, then of course black would need to get their king off the e-file as soon as possible, because there'd be some idea of rook to e1. But with these pawns blocking the e-file and also the pawn on d5 having advanced already, it's not easy for white to open the center. So black's king is perfectly safe on e8, and black can consider the plan that we are going to see in the game of pushing the kingside pawns and exploiting this pawn on h3. So let's see. Queen to e2. Okay, now white is really being slow here. I've said many times now that the best move is knight to d2, and again it's the case. You need to get your pieces off their starting squares. Important to follow the opening fundamentals. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate or an advanced player, these chess fundamentals still apply to everyone. And we're going to see what happens when you contravene them. So queen to e2. Much better to develop your minor pieces first. But the queen moving off the starting square is not as good. So here comes the plan. g5. White's trying to prevent black from playing g4 by adding an extra defender to the g4 square, but black just plays g4 anyway. So this is a temporary pawn sacrifice. The pawn on g4 is attacked 3 times by white and defended just twice by black. But after white takes it, black can follow up with rook to g8. And now the pawn that white just gained can't be held onto because it's being attacked 3 times by black and defended just twice by white. And white can't add another defender to this pawn. And there's 2 reasons for that. The first reason is this dark squared bishop on this diagonal prevents white from playing the move f3. That's one of the consequences of white advancing the pawn to d5 earlier. Remember I said that this bishop gains greater scope. Well, now we're seeing the consequence of that. The other reason is that white has neglected his queenside development. These pieces are all still on their starting squares, and when that happens, you can find that pawns or pieces or squares can't be defended in a good way, and that's the case here. So black's going to regain the pawn, and in addition is going to have this open file towards the white king. So let's see how white responds. White responds with a blunder. Now white's position was already bad, but this goes from bad to dead lost. This may seem to follow one of the opening principles, right? You're getting the bishop off its starting square, and not only are you doing that, but you're capturing a pawn to boot. But the thing about chess is that these rules that we play the game by, right, these rules of thumb, always need to be looked at concretely as well. And the problem with bishop to h6 is now black can play knight takes g4 with an attack on this bishop. Let's see what white should have done instead. White should have done instead knight to d2. It's amazing how many times white should have played knight to d2. Like there's probably 4 or 5 instances where this was the best move and white failed to play it every single time. The thing now is that, okay, black can get the pawn back, but white can look to hold on for a bit longer because now you can move this other knight out of harm's way and black can't invade with the queen. This is going to be very important, as we'll see. Okay, so white is definitely worse here, but white is surviving for the time being. But after bishop takes h6, when black takes on g4, there's 2 threats here against the knight on h2 and against the bishop on h6. If you take the knight, then black can capture with the bishop, and now the white queen has to move. In the book, the author suggests perhaps queen to c2, but now this threat is devastating. You can't take the bishop because of the pin along the g file, and if you play g3, well then the black queen enters, this pawn is still pinned thanks to the rook, and pretty quickly white's going to find themselves checkmated due to the weakness on the light squares. And so what happened instead is the bishop moved back, but now black wins after knight takes h2. King takes h2, and the black queen enters with decisive effect. The white king has to move back to g1, and now black plays queen to h3, which is game over. You can't really deal with all the threats. The threat is checkmate on g2, and what can white do? Let's see. What if you try and defend the threat this way? Okay, so now the queen is defending the threat against g2, but now black again has this dark squared bishop, and now you can use it to finish off the attack with bishop takes e3. If white takes the bishop with the queen, then you lost control of the g2 square, and that's checkmate. And if you try and block with the rook, the instructive thing here is that you don't capture this rook, which would be very natural, I think, right? Let's win some material. No, instead of winning material, let's just end the game. The rook is pinned, so it's not defending against the g2 square. Interesting moment there, I think. I think a lot of players seeing this rook and this bishop would take the rook and, okay, white is definitely still losing this, but there's still some work to do. No, finish the game straight away. And if instead, after queen to h3, you try g3 to block the threat this way, then you're going to find yourself checkmated on the h-file. The threat is queen to h1 mate or queen to h2 mate, and if you try and prevent that by defending this way, then queen takes g3 ends the game. And for that reason, after queen to h3, white actually resigned there. So what can we learn from this game? I think two main things. First of all, it's the danger of playing a move like h3, the consequences of that, right? Black was able to launch a kingside attack with their king still in the middle, thanks to this closed center. We saw how that unfolded. And I think the second lesson is what happens when you don't develop your pieces. So many times I was saying that white's queenside was being neglected. And it's true that black's queenside was also not looking great, but all that black needed in the end, as the game transpired, were these two heavy pieces on the g-file and the h-file, and with white's knight in particular undeveloped, there was no way to defend the threats, and that was the end of the game. I hope you found that lesson to be helpful. I hope you can use some of that in your own play. Remember to develop your pieces off their starting squares. Try not to move the same piece twice in the opening. And why not try an attack if your opponent contravenes these principles? You can win the game just like Soultanbéieff was able to win the game with the black pieces here. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a like down below. Subscribe to the channel as well if you want more videos like this one. And feel free to drop a comment of what you thought of the game. Until next time then, I'm Nathan Rose. Thanks for watching and bye for now.